Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 300. Had a little technical difficulties in the last podcast. Sorry about that. I know that none of my clips were playing. The software that I use to do this podcast, I did a software update and it went back to default settings, and I didn't know that these clips weren't playing, and it was really frustrating because I put together a great podcast in the last podcast. I had some great clips that I really wanted you to hear, but it is what it is. Today, I'm going to pick up where I left off in the last podcast, talking about the same thing. I do a couple of the clips that I played in the last podcast that you didn't hear, I'm going to play in this podcast, but we are picking up where we left off, talking about the national debt, talking about the fiscal crisis that we are in here in the United States in 2025, and talking about Trump's economic policies to tackle this and to repair the economic problems that we have in this country. And people, no one really feels like the economy is in good shape. Even before Trump started to implement tariffs and do things to fix the economy, the entire reason that Donald Trump was elected, and the reason that Kamala Harris lost, and Biden wasn't able to get his approval ratings in the last couple of years of his administration. He wasn't able to get his approval ratings up over 40% because nobody believed in Bidenomics. Nobody believed in his economic policies, no matter how much the media was telling you that his economic policies were great. He was creating all of these jobs and everything was great. Nobody felt like it was great. Almost 80% of the country felt that the country was on the wrong track before Donald Trump was elected and sworn in. So the fact that Donald Trump is doing something, and that I think that it's really funny that when Kamala Harris was on The View, when she became the nominee, she was asked on The View, what would you do different from Biden? And she said, I can't think of anything different. Well, Trump's doing something different, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be painful. But he's trying to do something different, and at least he is attempting to do something. And I'm going to tell you, and this is going to be a theme in today's show, that if you're listening to the people that created the current economic conditions that we're living in, and I'm not talking about with the past couple of trading days and the stock market and the Dow Jones and your 401k. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the economic conditions of the last decade, certainly of the last 5 years. If you're listening to the people that created those economic conditions about the economy today, you're not very intelligent. Why would you be listening to the people that created the mess that we're in about how to fix the mess that we're in? And that was what I was trying to convey in the last podcast. And again, I'm sorry that my clips weren't playing and it didn't come across. But there were 4 points that I wanted to convey in the last podcast, and I don't want you to lose sight of these points. And so I'm going to reiterate them. And one of the first points that I was attempting to make in the last podcast is that most Democrat and left-wing economists, most Democrat and left-wing politicians are Keynesian. They believe in Keynesian economics. And John Maynard Keynes is the English economist that I was introducing you to in the last podcast. And he believed that the business cycle could be controlled, could be managed when when the economy is in a downturn, that the government can spend, the government can create money to fuse into the economy so it can manage the downturn. The business cycle is boom and bust, as I was saying in the last podcast. So when the economy is not booming, when there is a bear market, when there's a downturn, John Maynard Keynes theorized that governments should create money, should deficit spend to fuse that money as stimulus into the economy to stimulate the economy. And most Democrat politicians, most left-wing economists believe in Keynesian economics, believes that the government should spend and the government should stimulate the economy. They also happen to believe in an economic theory called modern monetary theory. And I was explaining that to you in the last podcast, where they believe that the debt doesn't matter, that that governments can keep printing money, they can keep creating debt, and the debt doesn't matter. We know that's not true because in Biden's first 2 years in office, in his first 45 days, Democrats by themselves, without a single Republican vote, created $1.9 trillion in stimulus. Keynesian economics, they created $1.9 trillion in stimulus to fuse into the economy. And that's where you saw that growth coming from. It was coming from the government spending almost $2 trillion, but it caused inflation because that's what happens when these people theorize these things like MMT and Keynesian economics. They don't see what happens with inflation and the dollar losing value. But that's what happened in Biden's first 2 years, that we had massive inflation, almost 10% inflation because of the $2 trillion that they created in the first 45 days to stimulate the economy, Keynesian economics. And then to address that, after the first 2 quarters in 2002 were negative, they said it wasn't a recession, though, because we're adding too many jobs. It wasn't a recession. I thought that it was funny because all these talking heads in the media over the weekend, they're asking Trump officials, are we headed into a recession? Are we headed into a recession? And every Trump official addressed the most recent job reports. Because basically what they're saying is that you changed the definition of recession. We're not going to have a recession if we are adding jobs. And the latest job report, we added, a lot more jobs than what they suspected that we would add. So when all these people over the weekend are asking Trump officials, are we going into a recession? They related it back to the jobs report. No, we're not going back into a recession because we're looking at all these jobs. Even if we have 2 quarters of negative growth, it's not a recession if we're adding jobs. That's what you told us. That's what they told us when Biden had 2 quarters of negative growth. They said it's not a recession because he's adding all these jobs. Well, then after the 2 quarters of negative growth in 2002, after, I guess, the $2 trillion that they created in Biden's first year, after that runs out, and then you have negative growth in the next year, then they create another $1 trillion in stimulus, the Inflation Reduction Act, which, if you guys don't know this, but Nancy Pelosi wanted that bill to be even bigger, but they couldn't get what's his name, the senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, on board. Then they finally get Joe Manchin on board for another $1 trillion. They do it by themselves without a single Republican vote. That's almost $3 trillion in stimulus in 2 years. That's Keynesian economics that Biden infused into the economy. That's where the growth came from during the Biden administration, from the government, from government spending, and that adds to this debt. And like I was explaining in the last podcast, if Trump wanted to have the same type of economy and keep the same type of game going that the Biden administration did, he would just have Congress pass more stimulus and put it into the economy and stimulate the economy. But that's not what Trump wants to do. He doesn't want to create an economy that is built around debt. He's trying to create an economy that is built around production. So that's one of the points that I wanted to make, is that these people believe philosophically in Keynesian economics and modern monetary theory, and they've been wrong. They've created this. They've created the fiscal problem that we find ourselves in. And again, if you're listening to the people, that created the current economic conditions that we're living in, you're not very intelligent, because those people have been wrong. So that's one point that I was trying to get across in the last podcast. Another point that I was trying to get across in the last podcast is I was referencing H. Ross Perot in the 1990s when he was running in 1992 against George H.W. Bush, who was a proponent of NAFTA, and Bill Clinton, who was a proponent of NAFTA. And H. Ross Perot was the only one who was against it. He was arguing that we can't compete with countries that have cheap labor, that have labor laws that we don't have, that we abide by, but they don't have to abide by. That don't have healthcare concerns, that don't have environmental concerns. So Ross Perot was saying we can't compete with those foreign countries that don't have the same labor standards that we have, and they have cheap labor. There's going to be a giant sucking sound to the South, and that's what we've noticed since 2003 when Bill Clinton signed NAFTA. And other trade deals even before NAFTA and after NAFTA, that we have seen this giant sucking sound of sucking jobs, not only to Mexico, but to Asia and all over the world where there's cheap labor, and American corporations are chasing that cheap labor. This was a clip that I played in the last podcast that you didn't hear, but I want you to hear it. This is Aaron Burnett talking about the Trump tariffs, and take a listen to what she says about Vietnam.
Take Vietnam. That's why I mentioned 90%. Trump claims that they have a 90% tariff on U.S. imports. So to retaliate, he would only hit them with 46%. So the reality is that Vietnam's average tariff rate is only about 9%, not 90. And they didn't have a typo. They got to that number a very specific way. They took the trade deficit that the United States has with Vietnam, which is large, $123.5 billion.
Which is large. She says they took the trade deficit, which is large. Yes, it's large.
Vietnam, which is large, $123.5 billion. And then they just divided it by the value of Vietnam's exports to the U.S., which in a big trade deficit is a small number relative to the deficit. And that's how they got to the tariff number, quote unquote, that Vietnam is charging. They get 90%. And then to look magnanimous and charitable, they say, oh, we're going to cut it in half, and that's all we'll charge Vietnam. But the bottom line is this. If the United States buys more from a country than it sells to that country, Trump is calling that a tariff. But that is not a tariff. That is capitalism. Maybe Americans buy a lot of bananas from a country because Americans like bananas and don't grow bananas in America. But that banana-selling country doesn't buy a lot of American goods. That's not a tariff. A tariff is a country saying we will charge you more than it costs to make something just because, and that is a tax. And by the way, and so she just like casually, and by the way, the reason that Vietnam has a trade deficit, why, Aaron? Because, and that is a tax. And by the way, a big reason that Vietnam sells so much to the United States happens to be because American companies are making things there. They're putting up factories there to sell goods back to America because labor's cheaper in Vietnam. Because labor is cheaper in Vietnam. And she says it just, and by the way, the reason that we have a trade deficit with Vietnam, the biggest reason is because American companies are manufacturing goods in Vietnam where they have cheaper labor and then shipping those goods back into the United States. And she says it just, like that's not a big deal. No, that's the entire issue. That's the issue that Ross Perot was making in the 1990s. That's the problem, that we can't compete with all of these countries all over the world that don't have the same standards, labor standards, environmental standards as we do, cheaper wages, that it's all about the jobs. It's all about the labor. And then this guy, I thought this was very interesting too on CNN. Quest is his name. He's a British guy, but I want you to pay attention to what he says here.
And by the way, to the point of those jobs that he's hoping to bring back. The Peterson Institute will tell you those are jobs that he's hoping to bring back that should not come back to the United States. Why? Because the US is now a digital economy. AI, it needs to have a new skill set of advanced economics and advanced industry, not those older jobs of manufacturing.
Listen to what he's saying. He's saying, so we don't want those manufacturing jobs back that has built China's economy over the last 4 decades. Those manufacturing jobs that has made China an economic powerhouse. We don't want those jobs back, is what this British guy says. That the jobs of the future are the tech jobs, the AI jobs, is what he said. Which, if you go back to just a few months ago when we were having the debate over the H-1B visas, they were telling us that the reason that we have to bring in Indians from India on H-1B visas is because Americans can't do the tech jobs that this guy's saying that those are the jobs that we want. We don't want the manufacturing jobs where the guy, where dads can wake up in the morning and go and work and build stuff and make an honest living where he can buy a home, raise a family. We don't want those jobs. That the new jobs for America are the tech jobs, and we got to bring the Indians in to do that. Listen to this. This is just crazy.
That should not come back to the United States. Why? Because the US is now a digital economy. AI, it needs to have a new skill set of advanced economics and advanced industry, not those older jobs of manufacturing. And so the risk is that this entire policy is pushing the US industry in the wrong direction to bring back the wrong sort of jobs, when what's needed is a much more modernized digital future.
A much more modernized digital future, and we're going to bring the Indians in to do those jobs because the Americans are not smart enough to do those jobs, is what they told us when we were having the H-1B visa debate, is that that Americans can't do these jobs, that the Indians are going to come in and do those high-tech jobs, and we don't want those manufacturing jobs that has built China's economy over the past 2 decades. And then Aaron Burnett just, saying haphazardly that the reason that Vietnam has a trade deficit with us is because all these American corporations are over there benefiting off of that cheap labor. Yeah, that's the problem, lady. That's the problem. That's what Trump's trying to rectify. I don't know if Trump's going to be successful at this or not, but at least he's trying to do something. So the third point that I was attempting to make in the podcast from last episode. So first 2 points is that most left-wing economists and politicians are Keynesian, believe in Keynesian economics, believe in government deficit spending to stimulate the economy. They also believe in MMT, that the debt doesn't matter. Ross Perot warning about the giant sucking sound and the fact that we can't compete with this cheaper labor. The third point that I was trying to make in the last podcast is this used to be a Democrat issue. This used to be a issue that at least the progressive left wing of the Democrat, something that they believed in. And when we talk about the changes that the two parties have made, like the Democratic Party is more of a war party now than the Republican Party. Free trade, the Republican Party under Reagan and Reaganomics was all about free trade, unfettered free trade and deregulation. The parties have changed in those regards. And you see in this last election, a lot of talk about Trump winning the working class and winning blue collar voters, even going back to 2016, winning Michigan, winning the Rust Belt, where these jobs used to be. These communities have been hollowed out because of these trade deals, and Democrats used to be the ones championing this. Democrats used to be the ones who cared about this. This is a clip I played in the last podcast. Bernie Sanders, take a listen. This is the way that progressive Democrats used to talk about free trade.
Further, what they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America, because what we should establish is a policy of unfettered free trade. We don't need tariffs. What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street, people who are making 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, health care, pensions, throw them out on the street, because somehow, Madam President, we are going to create wealth in America and good paying jobs in America as we shut down plants. We move to China, corporations there pay workers 20, 30 cents an hour, and we bring the product back into this country. And anyone who goes shopping in a mall knows how difficult it is today to find the product made in America. But that is the philosophy. And I have to say, in that regard, the champion, and he is honest on this one, Senator McCain has been criticized recently for not being the most honest candidate we have seen in terms of his ads and so forth.
So Bernie Sanders was not the only one back then talking like this. This used to be mainstream in the Democratic Party, to be against free trade, to be against globalization, to use tariffs to protect American workers. Here's Bernie Sanders in 2019.
I believe in trade, but I believe in fair trade, not unfettered free trade. I do not believe that we should be shutting down factories in America and having corporations run to desperate countries where people are paid $1 or $2 an hour. Yeah, I don't believe in that.
That's the same thing that H. Ross Perot is saying. And this is something that Democrats understood. I was explaining in the last podcast how the World Trade Organization met in Seattle in 1999, and there was huge protests. It was called the Battle for Seattle. Huge protests against globalization. Most of the people that were there were people from the left wing. These are progressive left wing activists. This happened in 1999, and then this leads into the 2000 election. As this winds down, then you're getting into. So you see this happened in November of 1999. So you're getting into the year 2000, just a few weeks later, and then the 2000 election starts. When the 2000 election starts, there was major left-wing pushback against Al Gore's candidacy. Now, I've told you that Bill Clinton and Al Gore, they reinvented government. They cut waste, fraud, and abuse, all the things that Doge is attempting to do. They balanced the budget. They had a great economy. Why was there so much pushback from the left wing? Why did Ralph Nader have so much support? Ralph Nader, who challenged Al Gore from the left wing, the Green Party, he had huge amounts of support all over the country. Ralph Nader. Why was Ralph Nader's message resonating with progressives on the left? Because if you go back and listen to what Ralph Nader was saying. He was criticizing Bill Clinton and Al Gore for selling out American workers to the fat cats, to the corporations that were shipping the jobs overseas. That's why there was an opening on Al Gore's left wing, is because of these policies, these trade policies. So that's the third point that I was trying to make in the last podcast, is that this used to be a left wing issue. This used to be a issue that was vibrant in the Democratic Party, being against free trade, using tariffs to protect workers. I also played this clip.
How far does China have to go?
I played this clip of Nancy Pelosi in the last podcast criticizing China. She sounds completely different now. A lot has changed. Democrats are against using tariffs now. They're against protecting workers. They're against all the things that they used to be for. And that's why Trump is winning working class voters. That's why Republicans are now winning working class voters, because that's what this is about. This is about workers. This is about labor. And there was one more point that I was attempting to make in the last podcast. And the last point that I want to focus on, that I was trying to make in the last podcast, which you probably didn't get the message because none of my clips were playing. But the last point that I was attempting to make is that there are many people many corporations in the United States of America who are invested in the rise of China as the United States declines. They have invested billions and billions of dollars in China, in the rise of China. And in a lot of ways, in these private organizations, China has invested in these corporations. And they've done so at the detriment of the United States, that they see China as this rising market, as this rising power. And if you see that in the future, China is going to be the dominant power on this earth and not the United States, then smart investors looking at the future invest in where they see that growth is going to be. And a lot of people, a lot of corporations in the United States are invested in China. It's funny because Nancy Pelosi, she is now tweeting and criticizing Trump's policy, even though if you go back and you listen, this is about 6-minute speech that she does on the floor of the House there, where she's talking about China, how dangerous China is, how we need to support tariffs and all this stuff. And then now, if you look at some of the tweets that she's put out, messages that she's put out criticizing Trump's policy, his recent policy, it's like, what happened to you, lady? But what happened to her is she's probably got major investments in China, because a lot of people have major investments in China. A lot of corporations have major investments in China, and they identify China as a growing market as the United States is failing. So that's important to understand, because you got to understand what their motives are. These people that are now criticizing Trump and what he's doing and trying to repair what these guys did. And one corporation that I want to use as an example here, this is just an example, because there's many of these, but the Walt Disney Corporation. This is from 2012, and Walt Disney starts to enter into this partnership with China. They have a Walt Disney amusement park over in Shanghai, China. Walt Disney and China have a very cozy relationship. And this is some investor news from back in 2012. Walt Disney Company, China named Walt Disney Company, China named a founding partner of China's Animation Creative Research and Development Initiative. Shanghai, China, and Burbank, California, April 10th, 2012, Walt Disney Company in China, the Ministry of Cultures, China's Animation Group, and Tencent, China's largest internet service provider, have founded a partnership. So this is all about how the Disney Corporation in China are partnered together in many ways. Not only the amusement park, which comes about in 2016, Shanghai's Disney Resort opens in mainland China. But China has been very involved in Disney and this partnership with Disney. Disney targets Gen Z for China's success. Walt Disney Company is doubling down on China's burgeoning consumer market through upgraded e-commerce offerings and one-stop solutions for partners to co-create locally relevant products, especially those for Generation Z and younger. So Disney's really making a push to push their Disney brand into China. And not only Disney, if you understand that Disney owns ESPN, so partnerships that they've made with China to push sports like the NBA and other sports using their ESPN product into China. Disney is heavily, and I'm just telling you, this is just one example. Disney's not the only one. This is just one example how China is influencing what's going on here in the United States. And how, I mean, if you're listening to Disney and Disney outlets criticize President Trump, you have to understand their motivation. You have to understand that Disney has a partnership with China. Disney doesn't want anything to happen to their cash cow in China. So Disney outlets, you have to be leery of what they're telling you about what's going on with this trade war. And it is a trade war. We've been in a trade war with China for a long time. We just finally got a president that's fighting for us. China has creative control over Hollywood. I don't know if this has to do with Disney, but this clip is about the movie, the sequel to Red Dawn. If you guys remember in the 80s or 90s, they did Red Dawn where with Patrick Swayze, where the Russians come and they invade the United States, where they made a sequel for Red Dawn. And in the sequel, they made China the villain in this sequel. And then China had creative control to force Hollywood to change the villain in the movie. Now, China has major influence. If they have influence over Disney, influence over Hollywood, influence over the news that you're hearing, China has major influence. Take a look at this clip.
The film Red Dawn starts with a sudden invasion by air of America's Pacific Northwest. After paratroopers descend, the Asian enemy is brought into view. Its leader is menacing.
He's a badass action villain. You know, he sort of possesses all the things that you love about villains in that respect. Like, he's just cold-blooded.
This evil villain and his soldiers had Chinese nationality when the film was first shot. When word got out, it brought a sharp response from within China. There was no official complaint, but a state-controlled newspaper ran articles with headlines like, "American movie plants hostile seeds against China." The film's negative characterization of the Chinese really irked.
For me, as a Chinese American, I feel that this movie, the portrayal of China being an enemy invading China.
Why was it okay? Why was it okay to portray the Russians invading the United States in the first movie, the first Red Dawn movie? Why was it okay to change the villain into North Korea in the sequel? But I mean, it's a fiction movie, but you can't make China the fictional villain. I mean, and you understand the control that China has. If you understand, just not only in the Disney corporations, in many of these Hollywood production companies, China is calling the shots and making editorial decisions on scripts, on what you, because these movies are bigger in the Chinese market than they are in the United States. So China has this editorial control in a lot of these movies and a lot of this programming because of these partnerships. And this is just one example.
As a Chinese American, I feel that this movie, the portrayal of China being an enemy invading China, invading the United States, first it's totally off the mark. It's unreal.
It's fiction.
But the other is I'm always worried about the repercussion of the moviegoers actually thinking that this is something could happen.
They mess with the wrong family.
The complaints from the Chinese registered. Film distributors in the West were reluctant to take on Red Dawn, fearful of negative repercussions.
Listen, negative repercussions that these filmmakers had to change the creative, their creative aspect that they put into this film. They had to change that because of Chinese backlash. People, you have to understand what's going on here.
This is something could happen.
They mess with the wrong family.
The complaints from the Chinese registered. Film distributors in the West were reluctant to take on Red Dawn, fearful of negative repercussions. China's movie market is rapidly expanding, and they didn't want to get shut out of it. The very unusual decision was then made to digitally get rid of the Chinese villains in the film and replace them with North Koreans, knowing that demonizing North Koreans wouldn't jeopardize revenue streams.
So knowing that using North Korea instead of China wouldn't jeopardize revenue streams. For revenue streams, we change the the script. We've changed the villain in this movie. And this is just one example. Again, this is happening as far as news reports go. This is happening all over our media where China has control because of the revenue streams. This is Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney. I want you to listen to what he says here.
International business is an important source of profit for the company. And when you develop the business into new markets like China, how do you bridge the culture gap?
No matter how much technology is breaking down traditional borders. And as a company that is in the cultural business, in a way, the entertainment business, because it's part of culture, it's important for us to not just export what we create in the United States to the world, expecting the world will enjoy it. But it's important for us to be creative and to seek out local creative people in countries around the world so that we can become more culturally relevant and part of a culture instead of just a visitor into a culture.
I think there is a iconic fairy castle in Shanghai Disney's resort, and we know that. So are you happy with the progress of this project?
Yes, I'm very happy with the progress of Shanghai Disneyland. It's the largest investment that the company has ever made outside the United States.
The largest investment, Disney Shanghai, is the largest investment that Disney has made outside of the United States, is what Bob Iger says.
Progress of this project.
Yes, I'm very happy with the progress of Shanghai Disneyland. It's the largest investment that the company has ever made outside the United States, which says a lot about our company's interest in growing in China and our confidence in China's future. It also...
Our confidence, and so we're investing in China's future. We see China as the emerging, upcoming market. We see China on the rise as the United States is on the decline. And Bob Iger says that we are investing into China. We see China as the future. And like I said, this is just an example. There's tons of corporations, tons of people that see what Iger sees in China being the emergent, rising superpower and wants to invest in China and the rising superpower at the detriment of the United States, even because he's a globalist. He has a global mindset. Trump has a nationalist mindset. He's worried about workers and people here in the United States. It's a different way of thinking. But what you got to understand is when you see news reports on ABC News and they're criticizing Trump's policy now against China and this trade war that we're in with China on ABC News, you have to take it with a grain of salt because ABC is owned by the Walt Disney Corporation. ESPN is owned by the Walt Disney Corporation. Many other outlets are owned by the Walt Disney Corporations, and Walt Disney is in bed with China. You have to understand that when you're watching The View and you're watching those hens on The View criticize Trump's policy and what he's doing in trying to protect American workers, you have to understand that ABC is Disney and Disney is in bed with China. One of the most interesting things that I saw over this past weekend was ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And George Stephanopoulos is interviewing Larry Summers. Now, going back to what I was saying, that if you're listening to the people that created the current economic conditions that we're living in, you're not too bright. You're not too smart. And one of the people who's responsible for the current economic conditions that we're living in is this guy, Larry Summers. Larry Summers was a deputy to Bill Clinton's Treasury Secretary during the Clinton administration when all of these trade policies and all of this got off the ground and Bill Clinton signing NAFTA and open up these markets so these corporations can reduce their margins on labor and make tons of profit. All of this was happening during the Clinton administration, and Larry Summers was the deputy treasury secretary to Robert Rubin in the Clinton administration. And in Clinton's last year, he becomes the treasury secretary. Larry Summers is Clinton's treasury secretary in the last year. And he's being interviewed on ABC Disney, who's in the bed with China, and he's being interviewed by George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos was he ran Bill Clinton's communication when Bill Clinton ran it in 1999, and then he was Bill Clinton's communication director in the Clinton administration. So what you're looking at here on ABC Disney, which is in bed with China, you're watching two officials from the Clinton administration that put us in this mess. And they're interviewing one Clinton administration official is interviewing another Clinton administration official on ABC Disney, the China network, and they're criticizing Trump's trade policies. They're criticizing what Trump is trying to do in repairing what happened under these two and what these guys did to us in the 1990s. And Donald Trump's trying to rectify that. And you have on ABC Disney, who's in the bed with China, Clinton official being interviewed by a Clinton official, and they're being highly critical of Trump's policy now. You think what do you think they're telling you, people? You think they're giving you the truth? You think that they are happy that Trump is trying to fix what they broke? I want you to listen to what this guy, Larry Summers, says. And I was just blown away by this. Listen to what he says.
What we need is a reversal of these policies. And until we have a reversal, I think we're going to have a real problem. This is a moment of testing for the president's advisors. The intellectually honest ones know that this reflects a presidential 40-year fixation, not any kind of proven economic theory. This is the economic equivalent
theory
of what creationism is to biology, or what.
Wow. I was blown away by that. This is economic theory. And this is, he relates it to what creationism is to biology. He says that this is like what creationism is to biology. Wow. Interesting that his economic theory is the correct economic theory, and his economic theory, Keynesian economics, MMT, like I was telling you about, helped create this almost $37 trillion in debt. He helped create the situation that we're in, and he is more responsible than a lot of people, because he was there from the beginning. He was there. And that's the thing too, that I was trying to bring up Barack Obama in the last podcast. You didn't get to hear any of those clips, but, the time to do what Trump is doing now to repair the American economy and empower the middle class and, restore American jobs and reshuffle the deck was in 2009, after the crash in 2008, a crash that this guy helped set up in the Clinton administration. And Obama was running in 2008 saying, that we need to empower Main Street and not just Wall Street. I'm going to fight for Main Street and not for Wall Street. He criticized the NAFTA. He criticized all these other trade practices, and he said that he was going to fix it. And at that time, it would have been the perfect time to fix it. All the pieces of the American economy, of the world economy, were on the ground. And this guy, Barack Hussein Obama, is going around on the campaign trail in 2008 over and over again saying that I will rebuild the economy, the American economy, from the bottom up. I will rebuild the middle class, and the time to rebuild the middle class and to do all these things to repair the middle class and repair the American economy were in 2009, when all of the pieces were on the ground. And Barack Obama comes in, and who recovers first? Wall Street recovers first. He empowers Wall Street. He bails out Wall Street. It took Main Street. Main Street still hasn't recovered, quite frankly. And who was Barack Obama's chief economic advisor? This guy, Larry Summers. He was Barack Obama's chief economic advisor, the very guy who was there back in the 1990s, who helped set up the deregulation, repeal Glass-Steagall, not allow Brooks-Liborn to regulate the derivatives, all the things that created the crash. Obama says he's going to come in and repair all those things and rebuild the economy from the bottom up. He doesn't do any of that. And his chief economic advisor is Larry Summers. This guy is saying that this economic theory that Trump has is like creationism to biology. I guess you don't know anything about microbiology, Larry Summers. I was blown away by this.
Reflects presidential 40-year fixation, not any kind of proven economic theory. This is the economic equivalent of what creationism is to biology, or what ending vaccines is to medicine.
Creationism is to biology, is what Larry Summers says. Again, if you're listening to Larry Summers, if you're listening to the people who created the economic conditions that we find ourselves in right now, you're not very smart. China. In Joe Biden's first few weeks in office, when he was sworn in 2021, this was an interaction that this is the foreign minister from China, and he is in a face-to-face with Joe Biden's Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. And look at the way China talks to the Biden administration. He just comes in, and this is a Chinese foreign minister, and he tells Biden's Secretary of State, don't speak to us like you have strength. You can't speak to us like from a position of strength, that we don't recognize you as a strong nation, is what the Chinese minister says to Joe Biden's ambassador's face.
现在讲一句，你们没有资格在中国的面前说你们从实力的地位出发同中国谈话。
So let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the United States does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength.
24年前，
So let me say here that the United States doesn't have the qualifications to speak to us from a position of strength. Can you imagine a Chinese ambassador saying that to an American ambassador? Don't try to talk to us from a position of strength. What would embolden the Chinese foreign minister to say something like that to Joe Biden's ambassador? Then a few months after that, this is Joe Biden to Xi Jinping. Biden reinstates commitment to one China policy on Taiwan and call with Xi. So Joe Biden's telling Xi that even though there's all this rhetoric around supporting Taiwan, we have to give Taiwan aid so they can maintain their independence. Joe Biden in phone calls is telling Xi that the United States, under the Biden administration, that we reinstate our commitment to one China. That means that Taiwan belongs to China. That's what one China means. It's a year later, Biden in a phone call with Xi, Biden tells Xi, one China policy towards Taiwan has not changed. I still haven't changed my one China policy, which one China means Taiwan belongs to China. This was Joe Biden's policy, one China. And then you remember in 2023, when Xi comes to the United States to this event that they have in San Francisco. Remember, San Francisco clears the streets of all the homeless and clean up the streets for Xi. They won't do it for their own citizens. They won't do it for the citizens of California to clean up the streets, but they clean up the streets for the leader of China who's coming to San Francisco. And if you remember when that happened, that Gavin Newsom got all this criticism because they're cleaning the streets for the leader of China.
San Francisco has cleaned up its homelessness in preparation for a visit from Chinese President Xi Jinping, scheduled for this week. The cleanup of the city comes as Governor Gavin Newsom visited China last month. The cleanup included a power washing and scrubbing of the city's streets and the removal of most of the city's homeless camps.
They did this for China.
Quote, I know folks are saying, oh, they're just cleaning up this place because all those fancy leaders are coming to town. That's true because it's true, but also true for months and months and months before APEC, we've been having conversations. APEC refers to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, which will host an expected 20,000 CEOs and heads of state in the city this week.
So they clean up the streets, get rid of the homeless, power wash the streets because the Chinese president is coming. This is Biden in San Francisco during that summit meeting with Xi. Look at this. Look at how chummy Biden is with Xi. I'm trying to show you the different relationship that the previous administration had with China opposed to the adversarial relationship that Trump is now taking with China in this trade war. That Biden was Xi's lapdog, committing to a one China policy and saying that, that basically that Taiwan belongs to China because that's what one China means. Him having San Francisco clean the streets for the leader of China. And then this meeting, China telling Biden administration that don't speak to us from a position of strength. This is the relationship Biden had with China. China basically told Biden what to do. You don't speak to us from a position of strength. You better have a one China policy. Xi, this is during that summit in San Francisco, and this is NBC News. Xi warned Biden during summit that Beijing will reunify Taiwan with China. That Taiwan belongs to us, and Xi says that we're going to make that happen. Biden had already reiterated several times during his administration that his recommitment to the one China policy. And Xi's basically telling Biden. Now, Biden signed a bill where we gave all this aid to Taiwan and telling everybody we're going to fight for Taiwan's independence. Nothing could be further from the truth under Biden. Biden was committed to one China. Biden's telling Xi that we have a one China policy. And Xi's telling Biden that we're going to reunify Taiwan with China.
So, Kristen, it sounds like that was not about all that was discussed about this. What more do you know about what the administration's reaction has been, policymakers' reaction? I mean, this happened a little while ago. What's going on behind the scenes since then?
Well, so we know that President Xi was very blunt. He was candid. He was not confrontational. And he basically said that he plans to reunify, that China plans to reunify Taiwan with the mainland. Look, this fits into what he has consistently said publicly, but Garrett, it lands differently when he is speaking directly to the president and against the backdrop of these tensions between the U.S. and China in the wake of that spy balloon incident. The whole purpose of this meeting was to try to bring down the temperature on
I forgot about the spy balloon. I forgot that Biden let the spy balloon, navigate throughout the entire continental United States. And she says, Welker's here. I mean, yes, Xi's always said that they plan on reunifying China and Taiwan, but it's different when he says it to Biden's face. How's it different? The foreign minister from China looked Biden's ambassador in the face and told him, you can't speak from a position of strength. I mean, what's Biden going to do? Well, what is Biden going to do? He's going to do nothing. He's going to do nothing. Trump's doing something. All right, I'm almost done. I want to play a few clips from this guy, Fareed Zakaria, because this is the biggest clown on TV, if you ask me. And he's been railing every week against Trump's policies, the tariff policies, the policy to bring back manufacturing jobs in the United States. And he's against it. He's saying that Trump's making the wrong moves. I want you to listen to a little bit about what Fareed Zakaria says here.
At the heart of the Trump administration's policies is one overarching goal. In J.D. Vance's words from a speech this week, it is to stage the great American manufacturing comeback. Trump believes that the key to transforming America along the lines he wants, economically, socially, and politically, is to revive the factories and foundries across this country. Unfortunately, not only is this highly unlikely to happen, but the efforts to move in this direction will be costly and damaging for Americans. The idea that America should make more things is a seductive one. We all think of a rich and powerful country as one with huge factories, belching smoke, churning out stuff, and selling it to the world. It's deeply imprinted in our minds, but it is an image of the past, not the future.
Image of the past.
The most advanced economies in the world today are almost all dominated by services. Services account for the vast majority of jobs in the world's richest industrialized countries. In America, services account for over 80% of all non-farm jobs.
So this is very important what he's saying here, because he's right. And everybody's bringing up Smoot-Hawley from the 1930s and saying, oh, when we implemented tariffs in the 1930s under Smoot-Hawley, it had a negative effect on our economy, because during this was a lot bigger in the 1930s. It was probably the opposite of this, but the United States was a manufacturing base in the 1930s. So Smoot-Hawley, it makes sense that Smoot-Hawley would have harmed the United States if the majority of GDP was manufacturing in the 1930s. Today, the majority of GDP is not manufacturing; it's services and consumption, and like what he's saying. So putting tariffs and using tariffs is quite different today than it was back in the 1930s when Smoot-Hawley was implemented. So he's right about this, that the United States economy is a service economy. Still, a lot of workers are falling through the cracks, even in this service economy.
Manufacturing is less than 10%. America's distinctive exports to the world are software and software services, entertainment, financial services.
Yeah, bring in the Indians to do those jobs.
And other such intangible things. And in these, the United States runs not a trade deficit, but a surplus with the rest of the world.
Yeah, but in reality, we have a trade deficit on goods. I don't know what you're talking about. And then this is Fareed Zakaria from this past weekend criticizing the tariffs. I want you to listen to what he says.
Here's my take. Liberation Day is an apt name for Donald Trump's policy to impose massive new tariffs across the world. His view of the United States is of a victimized colony, taken advantage of by other countries that have robbed it of jobs, industries, and money. This week, when announcing his tariff plans, he said this.
Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years.
Trump's acolytes like J.D. Vance and Howard Lutnick parrot this view, painting a picture of a hollowed-out country with empty factories, unemployed workers, and stagnant wages. The reality is the opposite.
Listen to what he says. He says that Trump paints the picture of hollowed-out factories. Have you been to the Rust Belt, Fareed Zakaria? Have you been to Detroit? Have you been to Wisconsin? Have you looked at the manufacturing hollowed out factories that used to be there, that were the backbone of the American economy? What are you talking about? That it's quite the opposite. He's saying that that's not true, that there are no hollowed out factories, and that Trump's picture of the middle class and the Rust Belt being hollowed out is wrong, that's a lie, is what Fareed Zakaria is saying here.
More than 50 years.
Trump's acolytes like J.D. Vance and Howard Lutnick parrot this view, painting a picture of a hollowed-out country with empty factories, unemployed workers, and stagnant wages. The reality is the opposite.
The reality is the opposite.
Because it is the opposite. In other words, because of America's unrivaled economic power, that Trump can even attempt his tariff policy.
So this guy is a clown. He's saying we don't need manufacturing. He's saying the same thing that the British guy says, that we don't want those jobs, that we need the high-tech jobs, the service jobs, the AI jobs. We got to bring in the Indians to do those jobs. But the manufacturing, and we don't need that. The manufacturing are not the good jobs. It's not going to build the economy. Look at China. This is China. Look at China's economy. How did China build their economy and create such a great, and make themselves such a great economic power and world power in the last 4 decades? How did they do it? Listen.
China's economic growth over the past 4 decades stands as one of the most remarkable development stories in modern history. Largely fueled by strong industrial output, massive infrastructure investments, and a relentless drive to become a global manufacturing hub.
So that's how China built themselves into one of the largest economic powers on this planet over the past 4 decades is industrial manufacturing or industrial creation and infrastructure and manufacturing. This is how China has built their economy. And then Fareed Zakaria is saying, no, we don't need that. Well, it's good enough for China. If it's good enough for China, why is it not good enough for us to build our economy? If it's built them into such a great superpower in the past 4 decades, why can't we have industrial advancements and manufacturing and work on our infrastructure the way they did? It's because Fareed Zakaria is a clown. Fareed Zakaria wrote this book in 2009, 2008, 2009, Post-American World, where he theorized that we were in a post-America, that we were heading into a post-America. He theorized that China was on the rise and the United States was on the decline. In the book, Zakaria argues that thanks to actions of the United States in spreading liberal democracy, also trade, I'd put that in there, across the world, other countries are now competing with the United States in terms of economic, industrial, and cultural power. While the U.S. continues to dominate in terms of political and military power, other countries such as China and India are becoming global players in many fields. Fareed Zakaria, he theorized exactly what is going on, that China was on the rise and the United States was on the decline in this book, Post-American World. And now he's saying that Donald Trump, in trying to fix that and trying to repair that and bring manufacturing jobs back, address the trade deficit that we have with China and all the other things, they're stealing of our intellectual property. It's funny because he says that services and software is what we're known for. Well, China's stealing our software, stealing our software and rebranding it. It's a huge problem, and Trump's trying to address it. So I'm glad that I got through the podcast. Everything should work fine. You should hear all those clips. I hope you enjoy it, and then have a great week, and then we'll get back into this on Friday. I'll see you guys on Friday.